everybody. My name is Carrie Simpson, and I want to thank you all for coming out today and for Pastor Hope for having the courage to host a meeting and inform your people, because this is the most important thing. Nobody knows what's going on in the schools and in legislation. The work I do is basically to make sure people are informed about things that are changing, things that will be affecting them as parents and things that will be affecting children and the definition of family. Over the last 2 decades, we have seen an erosion of family rights and the definition of family, and we've seen the repercussions thereof as a result of it. This new agenda, though, out of all the years and of all the battles I have fought, and I have won, I am most concerned about. This is the most troubling agenda I have yet to see, because it is so calculated, it is so strategic, and it is so deceptive. How many of you knew that SOGI curriculum was coming into your children's school? No, we didn't get asked, we weren't informed, nobody told us about it, and as I visited both our elected officials, MLAs and school trustees and parents and different community leaders from the faith groups and from the Aboriginal community, nobody knows what's going on. SOGI stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity. It is basically a rebranding of the LGBTQ political movement.
Excuse me, Mary, can you speak louder?
Yeah, you bet I can. It's okay, how's that? Is that better? SOGI stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and it is the rebrand of the LGBTQ. We've seen a lot of advancement out of the lesbian and gay, and I want to say sex activists, because not everybody within that community agrees with what's going on. So we refer to the people that are moving this agenda, and it is a political agenda. As a matter of fact, it's a cult when you start looking at the definition of what a cult is and how they're given their own language, how they're given information and indoctrination. And they've been allowed to infiltrate our public education system, and we have to say no. Now, for a lot of people, this is a very scary subject matter. We held a rally just last week in Langley, and the original church where we were scheduled to participate asked us if we wouldn't hold it there, like 4 days before the big rally. And that was because they were afraid of protesters, because they received one phone call saying, "Why are you doing this?" So I said to the pastor in a meeting, so my last weekend was spent in emergency meetings with the pastoral staff there. I said, well, how many phone calls in favor would it take for you to hold the meeting? And he looked kind of sheepish at me. He said, Carrie, we're just not ready for this. We know it's coming, but we're not ready for this. And I remember thinking, okay, if you know it's coming, then you better get ready, because it's here and it's affecting kids right now. So I said to him, I said, well, when else have you had a meeting that you were so concerned about that you had to call the higher ups, because this particular facility rents out their facility often to different groups? He said, oh, what other time? And I said, well, when was that? He says, oh, when the Hells Angels wanted to have a funeral here. And I said, and did you let them have it? And he said, yes, we did. And I said, well, good, because the church should be outreaching like that. So let me get this right. Murderers and drug lords and all the problems in society, okay in your church. Parents, no. Protecting kids, no. Something's wrong with the church people. I want to just take a little bit of time to encourage you not to be afraid. I have stood in this battle for a long time, and our fear should be consumed by the knowledge of the mighty God that we serve.
Amen.
There is nothing that can come against us. We are born of a spirit of love and of power, not of fear. Yes. So we need to unite our voices, and I've talked to enough different people out of the Chinese community to know that there's a lot of reluctance and a lot of fear to be involved. Well, God gave us the gift of democracy, people. In Canada, we have a voice. You have not only a right, but a duty to participate in the decisions that are being made in government at all levels, including provincial, federal, and at our school boards. We need to unite. I've often said, because people go, well, Carrie, we don't know the language very good. Well, I will be your voice, but you need to stand with us. And together, our voice is the voice that matters. And people across this country are uniting against the SOGI agenda. So what is the SOGI agenda? The SOGI agenda is very strategic lesson plans. I've got the lessons here that start in kindergarten and go right through grades 12. Now what's happening is because our schools are in a little turmoil right now because of the new curriculum coming in, and that's a whole different matter, but you should be concerned about that as well. There are no longer teachers. Teachers are now coaches and facilitators. Students will get to self-assess. Report cards are non-existent for a lot of the grades. And children will get to decide what's of interest to them, not what they need to know. There is a whole push to more of a social agenda as opposed to educating kids with the tools and things that they will need to be successful in life. And above all, it's how you feel about things that matters and how it dictates to you. So if you don't feel like learning math that day, you don't have to. You know, it just goes on and on. So they've picked a really strategic time to put this into the schools, knowing that the new curriculum was coming down and that there would be a lot of confusion already about it. And what they do is they say, well, parents can opt out of the sex education part. That is true. The problem is sex education is different from sexual orientation, gender identity, indoctrination. SOGI has been woven into every part of the curriculum, and I'll give you some examples in a few minutes. So we've got a lot of different slides here about what is coming down. Understanding the issues around this. What they're doing is they're selling this to you as a way to combat bullying and be inclusive. So what happened is back in July of last year, the provincial government had a secret legislative setting, and they invited about 100 and some odd sex activists. Nobody else knew what was coming. Christy Clark ordered the MLAs to vote in favor of amending our BC Human Rights Code to include gender identity. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew what was happening. So then following on that, in September, the Minister of Education entered into agreement with the ARC Foundation, which is a charitable organization nobody knew anything about. It has 3 trustees. One of them is a very wealthy individual who donated over $200,000 to the Liberal Party. The Ministry of Education entered into an agreement with this private foundation, unprecedented. We don't do that in public education, to implement the SOGI curriculum. And what they did is they said, oh, this is going to solve the bullying programs and all the deceptive packaging that goes with it, so people would buy into it. What they didn't tell the public during this announcement was children will no longer be allowed to be referred to as boys and girls in their classroom. There are no more moms and dads. As a matter of fact, it gets more involved as children as young as 9 years old are told that they don't have to be the gender that they are assigned with their birth sex. They can be anything they want or anything in between. Kids in kindergarten, teachers are told, don't use pants or skirts or dresses when you draw figures on this chalkboard. Use just stick figures now. No pink, no blue, in trying to tell children what it's like to grow up in Canada. So this is the information that they put out, and it was a very deceptive announcement about this partnership that the Ministry of Education had gone in with. A sad-looking girl, you know, and then you couldn't even see the rest of the information. You had to actually expand it. And we have all of this on our website now with Culture Guard. So what they did, and I now put a freedom of information to get the memorandum of understanding. I'm getting close. The information's starting to trickle in now. But the ARC Foundation didn't stop there. They also purchased a department with the Faculty of Education at the University of BC for $125,000 to indoctrinate all the new teachers in BC coming through that program with the SOGI agenda. They give them faulty statistics about suicide rates. They tell them that children will be more embracing and more accompanying. This is about inclusivity and diversity. Diversity isn't what we define diversity as nations from all across the world coming together and living peacefully and harmoniously in Canada. No, diversity now is celebrating gender identity, transgenderism, transvestites, people who want to dress as drag queens like we have in Langley now, kids that want to do that. They've obliterated the dress codes as well and said anything your child wants to wear to express themselves. So the insanity and delusion is running rampant. So these are the founders of the ARC Foundation. The gentleman on my right is Robert Quartermain. He's the guy who gave $200,000 to the BC Liberals. The guy in the middle is a marketing guru, and Mark on the other end is very involved in politics down in California in the movie industry. So these guys have an agenda. The only other organization that they fund is the Queer Film Festival. And what they're not telling people is the Queer Film Festival, you can see on my right-hand side, also supports an organization called Out in Schools. They use Out in Schools to engage children in the making of social justice videos, and then they invite them to the Queer Film Festival for a party. We got pictures one year of the party. It was gay porn all over the walls. Children were engaged to play a game called Lesbian Debauchery, which I won't even tell you what was on there, and also had what they call the scientific element table, but the queer version. So they had the queer element table, where instead of letters representing different chemical compounds and those kinds of things from science, they had terms that I will not use in a place where we worship God, but it was depravity at its best. So that's what little kids were subjected to. No adults allowed, because you can't let adults come in. They might find out what's really going on. So the ARC Foundation, through Out in Schools, has already infiltrated a lot of our schools. And what is happening now, because, and this is why even independent schools have to start waking up, this is going to be mandated into every school. Funding is going to be dependent on children having this resource in their schools. This is part of how you're going to graduate these days. So you can see our UBC ARC Foundation. We have videos already of some of the sessions that have gone on there. The BC Teachers Federation Union President dictating to teachers what they're going to have to do in the classroom. Pronoun use is the other thing. You're supposed to ask a person how they want to be addressed from their pronoun, because just because I might represent as a female today, I may be feeling male inside. So I may want you to refer to me as he, okay? And I can change that, because this is all fluid. It's insanity, people, and it has to stop. And matter of fact, I think that's what makes it so difficult to battle, is because how crazy it is. People say, well, common sense will dictate. Common sense is not dictating, people. So the ARC agenda, you can see, as I say, they're very entwined. They've been working with the Ministry of Education for 2 years now. Unbeknownst to anybody, because they didn't register as lobbyists, we could not track them. We'll go to the next one. Okay, so TEFA is what they're using as the new department for the University of BC Education, Teacher Education for All, which is bringing in the SOGI agenda. And what else do we have? Okay, so three different components to SOGI 1, 2, 3. Policies, well, they've already got the policy, because when the minister announced this, he also mandated that within every school, public and private, that you had to include gender identity. So that means a boy transitioning to girls now can use your girls' washroom, change room, whatever else is happening. If you happen to have a transgendered man dressing up as a woman, he has those same rights to go into your recreation center now, where your daughters may be changing or your sons may be changing, depending on which way they're going that day. 2, environments. So they want inclusive environments, and I agree. This program is inclusive. It wants all your children to be as confused as the makers of this program are. Curriculum resources, let's talk a little bit about those. So, books are big in the elementary grades. over here, we have some of the examples. Jacob's new dress, okay? This book, teachers are told to put in your classroom, read it, make sure kids can see it, revisit it all the time. Now, there's more than a problem about this book than Jacob just wearing a dress. This book also lets kids understand that if you bully your parents, you're going to get your way, okay? It makes the parents to be dumb and easily manipulated, which I have 4 kids, you know. There's 2 of mine, I wouldn't want that message being given because they knew it naturally, right? So that's just one of them. This book, and you have to look beyond. So this is about 2 boy penguins. Nice, you know, and it's all nice and soft. The Trojan horse, right? The deception that they walk in with this. And this book talks about how these boys enjoy and do all the kinds of things 5- and 6-year-old boys like to do. Swim, play together, do all those kinds of things. But a few pages later, suddenly they want to have a baby together. Now, twisting, you know, it says, you know, all great deceptions are 90% truth. It's that 10% at the end, that twist, that will get your children. In California right now, there's a big kerfuffle because in kindergarten, one of the children decided they want to transgender or transition. Now, we're going to see more of this because this is kind of like the trendy, cool thing to do. I mean, the kids in schools get way more attention if you're gay or transitioning. Forget being gay now. If you come in drag, you're the hot shot, you know? So we're going to see more of this. The reality is, though, kids who really suffer from gender identity dysphoria during their adolescence, 86% come out okay, you know? Remember goth, big, you know, suddenly we saw the kids dressing up like goth, you know, black eyeliner, black this, black that. When the Twilight series came out, suddenly kids wanted to be vampires, you know, that's what happens. But this is different because the teachers now are encouraging these kids. So what happened down in California was this little kid wanted to transition and they were gonna have a transition party for this child in the school. So none of the parents were aware of this. The child went into the bathroom and came back dressed in the opposite sex. Kids went home crying, "Mommy, do I have to change? I like being a girl. I don't want to be a boy." They were so confused. Needless to say, there were some righteously angry parents, and rightly so. I just got another headline news, I think it was out of Florida. A teacher decided to teach kids about what some sex toys are used for. Fortunately, one of the kids in the classroom took pictures of this insane teacher using things that shouldn't be in a classroom. I can send you the link rather than talk about it. On June 14th, I attended a production in Vancouver. I found reference to it in the Teacher magazine. This is the Teacher magazine. Have a look through it. The whole thing is on, you know, let's make all the kids screwed up with this gender identity nonsense. But I also found this. These 2 teachers, right, holding up, I don't even want to tell you what it is. Sex at lunch, it's called. Really? I Google sex at lunch just to see if it's still going on. Yeah, there's one reference from 2014 where these girls were interviewed, and one said her favorite subject at sex at lunch was the study of pornography. Really? She now knew porn stars had 9 inches compared to the average guy, which, you know, didn't measure up quite as much, right? Vital information for a 16-year-old, don't you think? Another one talked about her favorite subject being the history of masturbation. Vancouver High School people, Lord Byng. They had a Christmas concert. They put condoms hanging through the roof as a Christmas decoration. One of the songs they sung were the 12 days of STIs, sexually transmitted infections. We don't call them diseases anymore because infections sound so much easier and better and you can cure them easier. So I decided, whoa, somebody should go look into this. So I went to that school on Google, checked out Lord Byng, their school calendar, nothing there. Yeah, well, I know better than that. I go to the staff calendar. Sure enough, one more session of sex at lunch on June 14th. So I call up a friend of mine who lives down that way. I said, hey, you want to go to sex at lunch? She says, I haven't done that for a while. So I said, no kidding. I said, this is out of school. She says, wow, really? Let's go. So we created, I'm thinking, okay, there's a good chance we could get booted out of the school. So I'm going to create another document to take to hand out to the kids while we're there, in case we get this, because you can't see on the school grounds, but the kids, this is lunchtime, we can be handing out information on the sidewalk. So we march into the school. There's no sign saying we have to report to the office. That's good. We ask some kids where the auditorium is. They point us in the direction. As we get closer to the auditorium, I start seeing signs on the walls saying, sex at lunch, all grades welcome, and they're having a quiz show, like a reach for the top kind of thing. Now, Lord Byng has this beautiful auditorium. It's an old school, amazing auditorium. So we walk in like we own the place and we belong there. Some of the teachers are getting nervous. Well, who are you? As we walk in, the lady greeting the children is in tight jeans and red stilettos, handing them suckers. And I thought, how appropriate. Anyway, we got there early so we could get the seats because I had every intention of making sure I could take some pictures. And as the kids poured in, hundreds of kids, people, their parents have no idea what they're being inundated with at this school, pour into this beautiful auditorium. More teachers are going, well, who are you? What are you doing here? And we just acted like we were very excited about what was going to take place, right? So we could see them whispering, but nobody had to tell us to leave. So the event starts. The teacher welcomes all the sex addicts that come to sex at lunch. Can you imagine calling kids sex addicts? That's what they did. This place has got at least 10 teachers in it. 4 of the teachers are on the panel that are going to debate these other kids. Then the other teacher gets up, Mr. Nugent, and says, now, no recording, kids. We don't want any of this showing up on social media. Okay? Well, no, because parents might find out what's going on. Anyway, long story short, there was this quiz show to see who knew more about different things involving kinky sex. Questions were asked like, what do you call adults who dress up in animal costumes and have sex? That's what kind of things they were putting to these kids. What pharmacy will give you the morning after pill after midnight? Okay, and it goes on and on, 45 questions. You go to cultureguard.com because, you know me, I just hit my record button on my phone and we got it all. Including at the end when the teacher, while she was thanking the teachers for their participation, as a thank you gift, gave them a bottle each in front of all these kids of sex lube. Okay, that's what's going on in our public schools, people. That's the insanity. That's the insanity that embraces the SOGI agenda and all things that are coming. They want to break down these kids. No values, no morals, no sense of what's right or wrong, no standards, all the things that God gives our kids as far as natural modesty and all those great gifts. They want to rob them of. Now they want to rob them of their identity as males and females. And you know why? Because when you do that, you create so much confusion and contention in families. Kids don't listen to their parents anymore. You create disruption and upset. And families are trying to deal with their kids. They're not paying attention to what's going on politically and all the things that we need to be involved in. I have so many families that come to me, Carrie, I wish I knew what had been going on with just the LGBTQ agenda. Because my kids are just indoctrinated with this. And it's not only that, it's undermining your values because these teachers say things like, your parents are old-fashioned. Oh, they must be religious. And they take away all the things that we as parents have the right to instill in our kids, and we have to say, no more. The state is not the parent of our child, we are. And we need to get that back. So the curriculum resources I'm going to just read to you, and you can look at them. I've brought them all here, and they're actually on Culture Guard as well. So starting in kindergarten, they redefine family for kids. They ask your little 4- and 5-year-old, because we have pre-kindergartners in kindergarten now, They ask your little 4- and 5-year-old to imagine what it would be like to have 2 dads and 2 moms instead of a mom and dad. Well, what right does the school have to even deviate anything from what I know is the right thing for my child? They tell little kids, and this is how they get out of kindergarten, grade 1, because they're assessed on this, what do you call 2 men who love each other? And they have to know the answer as being gay. 4- and 5-year-olds, people. And that's not even intellectually honest, that's intellectually dishonest. 2 guys that want to engage in relations don't have to be in love within that community, you know? Like anything goes. So we're misleading, misinforming, and I've always said, heck, if we're going to talk about this stuff, let's talk about it age appropriately and honestly. Let's talk about why syphilis is at a 30-year high in Vancouver, because young men 19 to 24 can't control themselves with having relations with other men. That's the reality. Oral cancer, men having relationships with other men, all-time high. And you know what? We're paying for it. You know, people talk about Trudeau going, oh, the government has no business in the bedroom of the nations. I agree with him, except they always leave out the next part where he said, unless it involves children or is done in public, okay? But let's go back to the out of context statement. I agree. I don't want the state coming in and dictating to me relations, but I want people having relations to keep their relations and their bedrooms out of my wallet. This is $1 billion industry, people, that is costing us money for 100% preventable diseases that are going around. So we have to change that up, not to mention all the nonprofit organizations that get funding. So the children are also told in kindergarten that they must celebrate all families, that they have to respect all families, and that all families are equal. Again, intellectually dishonest. All families are not equal. I was happily married, wonderful man, 4 brilliant kids. My husband became ill and passed away. I was then a single mom. I know what it's like to be a single mom raising 4 kids. That family dynamic is not equal to when my husband was alive and we were a whole family. Let's be honest. I know it's a bold statement and people go, oh, but let's be honest about it. If we're going to take this into the classroom, which we shouldn't, because to me, it's invasion of privacy now under the guise of, oh, just let's be all celebratory. The teacher's told to make sure she knows every family dynamic. Children are taught to talk about their families. Well, thank you. I don't want my 5-year-old blurbing to some teacher about everything that goes on in our home. That's not the role of the teacher. Then we start indoctrinating kids with the term sexism. But it's not our definition of sexism. This isn't about unfair labor practices. This is setting kids up for the gender identity discussion. Kids are taught about fairy tales and told, you know, those fairy tales are sexist. You know, all of us who want our Prince Charming, oh no, that's because society tells us to do that. Society tells us we have to be girls and girls do these things, and society tells boys they have to do these things. Heck, I have 4 kids. Boys are boys and girls are girls no matter what you do. And I have 15 grandchildren. When those boys get together, the girls just clear out because it's rough and tumble. The girls would much rather go pet the horses, right? So the natural things, the beautiful gifts and inclinations we have as male and female are now being robbed out of the kids. Girls are told they're as strong and as smart as boys. Well, you know, there may be the one exception to the rule, but the majority of men are going to outperform women as far as strength goes. That's the reality. And thank goodness. I love it when my strong sons can do things for their wives. I love it when my grandchildren now, who are getting taller than I am, you know, let me help you, Grandma, because I'm strong. It's important for boys to be strong. It's important for girls to be feminine. The gift, the miracle of being a mother is now being told to them as something that's evil and will get in their way when they want their career. What are we doing? Then we get into the real draft. Then we start talking about how gender identity is different. Now this is in grade 4. Gender identity, this is the grade 4. I'm going to read exactly what they say. Rationale. This is gender identity, media, and stereotypes. This lesson uses the term biological sex, which is assigned at birth based on external characteristics. Again, intellectually dishonest. And is sometimes different from gender identity, which is someone's personal sense of being a girl, woman, or a man, boy, or somewhere in between along the gender spectrum. That's the lesson, okay? What they go on to say is this lesson will explore the difference between a person's biological sex and their gender identity, and that gender roles and expectations are socially construed. No, they're not. You know, the human race has been around for a little while. We've kind of figured out the things that men are good at and the things that women are good at, and it really hasn't changed a whole bunch, right? Women still nurse babies when they're first born. I ain't seen a man do that yet, you know. It goes on and on. Then we get up into the higher grades, and there's every grade level has these problems. We just don't have time to go into every single one of them. Then they start turning your children into social justice warriors. Children's, you know, child soldiers basically for the cause, where they indoctrinate them with the language because there's a common language here. They indoctrinate them with the politics, the terminology, and it goes on and on. Those are the, so you can see every grade level. The family, we talked about that. It goes on in a calculated, strategic way designed to rob your children of their identity, designed to disassociate your child's identity of what it is to be a girl or a boy and make them unknown, fluid, whatever they want to do, wherever they want to go. Then they move them into the sex positive aspects, right, which we see with things like sex at lunch. This will be mandated in all schools. At the announcement, when I talked about it earlier, not only was the Minister of Education under the Liberal government there and a member of the ARC Foundation, but Doug Lawson from the Federation of Independent Schools also spoke. And he talked about and gushed how impressed he was and how happy he was to be a part of this agenda that was coming in. Fortunately, I've talked to a lot of members of the Federation of Independent Schools now who didn't have any idea what that organization was saying, even though they speak on their behalf. And I know that there's a lot of problems now for Doug Lawson for stating his approval and involvement with this. So what do? I don't, you know, I've never told people this in the past, but you know what? I think it's time we pull our kids out of the public education system and we stop funding it. I think for those that have their kids in private institutes, they should get the full funding every child gets that's in public education and quit the discriminatory funding. What happens right now is here in the Lower Mainland, and I'm just going to give you an average of figures because the formula changes, but basically there's $10,000 set aside for each child who resides in British Columbia for their education. If they go to public school, that public school district, when your child registers there, gets that full $10,000. If you go to an independent school that meets certain criteria, which the majority of them do, your child will only receive 50%. Now, why are we being penalized to send our kids to a school that's aligning with our beliefs, upholding what it is to be a good Canadian, not screwing them up, right? And making better citizens out of them. And I think it's time that we all got together and said, enough is enough. I have to subsidize my grandkids to go to a private school. I had to pay for my kids to go to a private school. And yet my property taxes still go to fund the public system. Well, if my kids or grandkids had gone to the public system, they'd receive 100% of that funding. So why do we sit back and only accept 50% when we send our kids to private schools? Nah, you know why? Because nobody's ever challenged it, nobody's ever said we're going to change it, and I think it's time that we did. But if we're going to do those kinds of things, we have to do them together. I've also gone around and talked to a lot of the different churches now, people, all these kinds of beautiful buildings that have facilities that for 6 days a week are empty. And we've said, will you open your buildings up so parents can have homeschool options? Lots of great things going on there. Technology is great. And you know, I say the public system wastes our kids a lot of time that they're learning stuff now that they don't need. Let's bring them into a classroom where teachers are the parents, or we hire somebody, or we do teaching co-op. There's all kinds of different models available now. Let's leave a system that's abusing the kids, and let's take our money out of it so other kids won't be abused. Because that's the problem. Even when we take our kids out, they still have to deal with the culture that's being created. They have to deal with this kind of delusion and insanity. Free speech is at stake here, people. There's a guy already hauled up before the Human Rights Commission because he won't agree that a man who transitioned to a really bad-looking woman is still a man. And he put pamphlets because this guy wanted to, this guy, and I call him a guy, he's not a woman. You can dress up like a woman, man, but that don't change the biological reality, okay? And yet, because Bill Watcott had the courage to hand out pamphlets and say to the voters who may have considered voting for this person, really, you want somebody who's suffering from a mental health issue, which gender identity dysphoria is, to be in government? And for that, he's been hauled up now before the Human Rights Commission. So at what point do we say our rights matter, and we're going to stand together, and we're going to do something about it? If you have children within the public school or even the private schools, we've created the Declaration of Family Rights. We did this several years ago when they started bringing in all of the LGBTQ stuff. Did we meet at the riot? Was that the first time we met?
Yeah, it was in Square Rock. No, it was quite early, not this time.
This is a war, people, and you know, when people get involved, it does require you to stand. I love the verses in that song that we sung. You know, this is your chance to really see what happens when you're standing on the front line of a spiritual war. I promise you, you will see all the stuff God talks about. Many people, back in 1997, they started bringing this stuff in with the NDP government was in power then. And people came to me and said, Carrie, what's going on? Well, I had 4 young children. I'm not known for wasting my time or wasting my words. And so we created the Declaration of Family Rights. Put it on your school, tell these teachers they cannot indoctrinate your kids with this insanity. And literally all hell broke loose. There were people, 10,000 of these things went out within a week. It was just crazy. Then the sex activist teachers got upset and they filed a human rights complaint against me. And I remember the day my a friend who worked with me very closely came in and said, Carrie, you've been hauled up before the Human Rights Commission. And I went, hallelujah. She looked at me because we're supposed to be scared. Pastors are getting hauled up for different reasons. They usually mediate and pay the people that they've oppressed or hurt their feelings of. No way, I look forward to it. I wanted to put them on the stand and cross-examine them. I wanted to find out where they're getting their money from and all those things. So I said, let's go. You want to take me to Human Rights Tribunal? I'm happy. Then they got scared. So it took 2 years. Finally, I had to say, I want this thing done. And of course, the tribunal had no other choice but to say, you know, we have to do this. Then the complainants, there were 8 or 9 of them, got scared. So I had to subpoena the complainants to appear at the tribunal of their own complaint, you know, which is interesting. And we had one person on the stand from their side. We got so much damaging evidence. It was a teacher in Surrey, Mr. Chamberlain. Tell me about your classroom and for children who have religious beliefs. He said, I require them to check their religious beliefs at my classroom door. Mr. Chamberlain, do you teach teachers how to circumvent Ministry of Education policy on notifying parents about what you are teaching? I certainly do, because you can get around it, and parents have no right to know what we do in our class because we have professional autonomy. Okay? Needless to say, after his arrogant comments, which read for a number of pages in the transcript, they withdrew the case against me. And we haven't heard from them in a formal way since. So when you stand, and I tell you these stories, when you stand people, the enemy just kind of falls away. You know, we had 6 protesters outside our rally where 300 people packed a town hall this last week. They couldn't get in, so we had to open all the doors so that they could pile their chairs outside to listen to what was going on. Laura Lynn, Tyler Thompson from 700 Huntley Street came on, and she did a great introduction to it for the Christian point of view. I came on because I speak just from common sense. You know, it appeals to everybody, regardless of where you're from. Paul Dirks, wonderful man, stood up and talked about Bill C-16 when he was before the Senate, but he came, he's reviewed over 300 different research documents and gave an overview of the insanity that's ensuing and how this is harmful to the kids that may even now be suffering from gender identity. Because to encourage them and to affirm them makes their troubles more long-lasting, rather than looking at the 86% that will just return to normal, right? You know, I try to give this example. A child suffering from anorexia, right? Delusionally thinks they're fat even though they're skin and bones and on death's door. It's a mental health disease. Would you go up to that child and say, "You're fat and I affirm you in that and you should go lose another 10 pounds? Absolutely not, if we care and love about that child. Truth, love, encouragement, but it has to be reality-based. It can't be delusionally based. So the Declaration of Family Rights is a great document. I know that they are being signed as we speak all over the place. Over here we have a lot of information. If any of you go to the public schools, please take these and hand them to your public school teachers. The teachers, by and large, don't want to teach this. There's a lot of backlash right now, but they're being bullied into compliance. We actually found videos from one of the SOGI indoctrination summits, the SOGI Policy Summit, where some of the administrators and leads, the SOGI leads in the different districts, gave their overview about what was happening. One assistant superintendent in the Langley district talked about how she was requiring teachers to compromise their values and beliefs. She says, you know, this is an obstacle. But then when I tell them they're going to be saving children, they buy into it, quote unquote, they buy into it. She also says, as far as informing parents, parents are just going to have to learn that this is the way of the world. That's it. Well, no way, lady. This is not the way of the world for my children or my grandchildren. And this is not the way it's going to be for the overwhelming majority of Canadians who are getting informed about this and just saying no to this insanity. So there's a lot of momentum being put here, but together we have to just put the brakes on and say, end it. We created an organization. Culture Guard is kind of a rough and tumble organization that deals with a lot of issues. Parents United Canada is one that sticks focus truly on the rights of parents. Most parents are unaware that here in BC, your 12-year-old can go get an abortion without your knowledge, right? The Infants Act. Parents don't know that children are being vaccinated against sexually transmitted diseases and with vaccines that are known to be harmful. You don't find out about it because children can now consent to this. Birth control pills, abortion, morning after pills, all of that your kid can go and get and you won't even know what they're up to. The world has changed to a point where we as parents who love our kids have to step up to the plate. We have to be courageous and we have to care enough about our communities and our province and our nation to become involved. We have to do this politically. In 2001, I led the charge to change the government. And it started back in 1997 when they brought in the LGBTQ books and those kinds of things. And there were only basically 3 districts that ever adopted it. As a matter of fact, the sex activist teachers are quite upset because teachers didn't embrace the agenda. So what we did is I traveled around the province. I went to Terrace, there were 800 people. I went to Nanaimo, Bevan Park Arena was filled to overflowing. Prince George, the same thing. Everywhere we went with the message of parents uniting, thousands came out to hear the message. And in that time, then that election came to get rid of the NDP. We had a lot of candidates set up that were very conservative and very good people. And the Liberal Party of BC was pretty good to begin with. But they lost their way when Gordon Campbell was no longer leader and Christy Clark came in. And we saw a very different style of leadership. But in 2001, I knew we were going to win the election. But what I didn't and wasn't prepared for is that we nearly obliterated the NDP, leaving them with two seats. And my message to politicians was there, I don't really care politically what people do, but don't mess with parental rights. Don't mess with the kids. And they got the message loud and clear. And if we're going to do that, our government right now is very unstable because of the numbers that we have. We have to be ready. We have to raise people up who will put their name in and be supported into the political arena. We have civic elections coming next year where we have to make sure we put into place proper school trustees. Whether your kids are in the public system or not, your kids are going to have to be dealing with the products of that system. We need to make sure there's good people. We need leaders who are steadfast. And as I say, I help anyone who asks for it. I take anyone to task who needs it, regardless of political stripes. But we need our people, our core people, and we need them to be strong and steadfast in their understanding of not only politics and how all this insanity works, but have a vision and at the core keep the interest of children and families the most important message in their hearts. There's a lot on the go right now. I've only been back doing this since late May when a parent in Langley said, Carrie, can you come and talk to us about the SOGI agenda? And you know, I've been in and out of this. I took 3 years off to have a business to raise money for pro-life, pro-family causes, because one of the big challenges I always have is everybody loves what I do, but nobody wants to help out financially. And this is a war, people. It costs money. It costs money to create brochures. It costs money to print them off. It costs money to get the graphics done and put ads in the paper. And ads in the paper right now is where my heart is, because there are hundreds of thousands of parents that have no idea what is waiting for their little 4-year-old next Tuesday.
Yeah.
We have a right and an obligation to inform them. And we have to put some ads in the paper. We have to get video messages out. And you have a responsibility. You know, sure, I wouldn't want everything in my brain to be in all your brains. Quite honestly, it's not really a fun place to be often, right? But you can do something. You can tell 4 or 5 or 10 other people about what's going on. Take the brochures and say, you have to listen to what's happening. We have to stand together. Inviting people in to be informed is the greatest gift you can give. I've been battling over the last few days with the cult members, because these kids, these are products of the public education system who can't think. They are so blinded by this insanity that they don't even think anymore. And their arguments, and I've just captured them all on screenshots so that I can put a video together to say this is what your children, even if you're in the public system or homeschooled, are going to still have to encounter in their workplace and in their daily lives. So we don't get out of this just because our kids are either grown up or our kids are in private school or our kids are homeschooled. This is our culture, and we have a responsibility to be the salt and the light within all of our communities, not just our closed doors. There was an article in CBC News not too long ago where one of their columnists just reams on Christians. Stay in your doors, don't come out and get involved in politics. Oh, really? Wrong message, dude. So I filed a complaint against him with the BC Human Rights Commission. I haven't heard a word from them since, and he certainly hasn't published another derogatory comment about Christians. We need to stand up. We need to be involved. We need to encourage each other, and we need, most importantly, to unite. Unite our time, our talents, and our resources, and it takes so very little. That's the great part about this. I have been on the front lines. I have seen what happens when good people take a stand and say, no more. You know, we're not moving. Get this stuff out. It doesn't belong in our schools. Enough is enough. Thank you.